What's the mood there as we do get a glimpse into the frustration of these Australian Open tennis players who are stuck in quarantine? Was it a mistake, do you think, to let the Australian Open go ahead? Was this ever going to end that well?
Afternoon to you, Ash. Look, it was always going to be difficult, but from what I can gather and glean in the few hours since these troubles emerged with the players and other members of support staff testing positive, I don't think there's a huge amount of sympathy within the Victorian community, and I was interested to see too that the Prime Minister, speaking from Quilpie a short while ago in Queensland, didn't seem to have a large amount of sympathy either, and he would probably have a better sense of information in terms of what popular feeling or the feeling of the people is. Look, this was always going to be very, very difficult indeed. It was hard enough with the Indian and Australian cricket players, and now you've got several hundred players and support staff coming from various parts of the world where testing regimes are maybe less robust than they've been in this part of or in Australia. So it was always going to be difficult. I am a bit surprised at I'm not that surprised at the level of entitlement, having observed the behaviour of tennis players over the years, that there's expectation that somehow they could or should be treated differently from the rest of the community. And remember, of course, that it's Melbourne, which went into a very severe lockdown during the winter months of this year, with great cost to people's personal lives and to their economic standing as well. So, no, I don't think there is a great deal of sympathy. One other thing I'd say too, Ash, is you've got to ask in these circumstances what it may or may not mean for the Tokyo Olympics coming up in the middle of the year. The Japanese are struggling to contain the virus now, and it won't be several hundred athletes, it'll be thousands and thousands of them. And you do wonder whether, if it's difficult to get the Australian Open off the ground, up and running, imagine how complicated, complex and difficult and perhaps dangerous it would be come the delayed Tokyo Olympics in the middle of the year.
Yeah, and the polls in Japan are certainly showing that public sentiment there is very anti the Olympics. The latest poll out just a few days ago suggesting that a majority of Japanese just want it to be cancelled altogether. They're not keen for all of these international athletes to be flown in at all. So that'll be a watch and wait over the next few months, no doubt. Jim, we've also heard today from a number of state premiers this border war debate we've seen between them. Well, it's something of a broken record now, isn't it? You can understand each state premier has their own interests, their own state at heart. Do you see them coming to any sort of agreement on these border issues, any national set of guidelines that they'll actually follow regarding what should trigger these border closures, or do you expect it's likely to continue on as is, with each state effectively running their own regime?
Look, I think states running their own race is likely to be the way it's going to go for at least the short to medium term. The opportunity for national guidelines and national agreement was many, many months ago. Probably, indeed, it was lost at the time that Victoria went into lockdown after the second wave here. And it's not really surprising that each state is going its own way in the absence of national agreement many, many months ago. I do find it a bit interesting that at the very point that Gladys Berejiklian is having a shot, particularly at Victoria, but also to a degree at Queensland, comes at a moment where she's acknowledging testing rates in New South Wales are not high enough. And while there is to be a state cabinet meeting tomorrow to discuss the restrictions that are currently in place in New South Wales, there doesn't seem to be any certainty that there'll be any lifting of the local restrictions on mask wearing, or indeed on the number of people allowed within homes and so on and so forth. So if that is the case, I don't see really why she can be expecting Daniel Andrews to be more accommodating of people returning or coming from New South Wales than they are currently. In a situation where each state is taking advice from its own health professionals, and there is variation between them, and also variation in the challenges that are being faced, I don't really think that Gladys Berejiklian's in much of a position to be giving lectures to other premiers about what to do. And I do wonder also whether it's a bit of a case of look over here rather than looking at what's going on closer to home, trying to shift attention away from the performance perhaps of people in New South Wales and maybe of the New South Wales government itself.